Hi everyone.
Welcome back, viewers. Welcome to SOCA TV. And of course, we have a very enlightening show for you tonight. To all our regular viewers, welcome back. And to our new viewers, thank you for joining us.
Now, since time immemorial, dances were developed. Ancient philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle believed that dance contribute to aesthetic, moral, and intellectual values, as well as to enhancing physical adeptness and overall well-being. Dance is a spatial and temporal art form which uses non-verbal communication in the creation of artistic form. Dance embraces an intellectual, cognitive, and aesthetic body of knowledge, providing both personal and social experience. It allows people to communicate with others in a way that is different from the written or spoken word, and from other visual or auditory symbols. Like any other art form, knowing and perceiving in dance occurs on both the conscious and subconscious levels. Dance involves knowledge of movement, vocabularies, and compositional forms, which are used to create specific works within a historical or cultural context. Mindy, it's off to you. Tonight we have an enlightening
Yes. We have
panel.
a panel of guests. I'm really excited to have a discussion with them. Guys, it's always really good for us to have discussions with those who would have done so well in their homelands and they have done so well abroad. So now that we have had a chance to have a discussion with them, I hope that our local artists will, take some examples and take some advice from them. So listen out, guys, listen out.
And they have a lot to offer, coming from international standards. So here we go. Up first, he's a former member of the Laissez-Faire Dance Company under the direction of Dame Joyce Curtin. The second place winner on his awards Teen Talent with a duet to the song, Everything Must Change. His partner, Napari McGill's high school dance mistress, Miss Beverly Hines. A member of the Pleasantville Folk Performers and a past Best Male Dancer in the Best Village Trophy Competition, a fellow alumni and scholarship winner at the School of Toronto Dance Theatre. Ladies and gentlemen, up first, Mr. Bakary Lindsay.
Hey,
Hi, Bakary. Welcome to the live.
Welcome to SOCA TV.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. Sort of coping with some back injuries, but other than that, life is great.
Well, yeah, we reached the age for that, huh? So, let's see a little about, tell our viewing audience a little about yourself.
Oh, geez. I think you gave them quite a sort of
internationally. I didn't think anything internationally here.
History, but
you have so much on your plate.
I know it's a lot. I think I would call myself multifaceted. I'm not performing professionally anymore. I've sort of slowed down that part of my life, but I'm more into education now and an educator and researcher. So that's been my primary focus, and also artistic direction. So I'm more or less choreographing, creating, vice principal of a middle school. So I'm doing that, looking at equity and arts and education, and also researching dance as it pertains to development within the Caribbean and North America.
Wow, eloquently done.
Thank you.
Edison, I'm proud of you, fellow alumni, School of Toronto Dance Theatre. You did well.
Yes. Our next guest is has been actively carving out a space for Black dancing bodies in Scandinavia since 1998, guys. Born right here in TNT, he is currently residing in Norway, performing and producing choreography of Caribbean and African dance. He has a codified system which he has lovely named Talawa, which I am excited to hear about. Let us welcome onto our screen, SOCA TV, Mr. Thomas Talawa. Press 2.
Hi, Mr.
Hello.
Good evening.
How are you?
Welcome to SOCA TV.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Past guest, yes. For our new viewing audience, can you just give them a little snippet about your works and your experience? Just tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Talawa technique. So I have a fully codified technique that is being taught at university level, which the coordinates are Caribbean and Africans. It does not go through ballet. So it's for the Black body, and technique can do a lot for us. Technique can allocate space, it can create jobs, and it can protect your material. So I'm also into the politics of what technique can do for Black dancers and Caribbean dancers especially, because the Caribbean is very often kind of a non-space. And you have people like Miss Dunham and others who are credited with making Caribbean dance techniques who are not Caribbean. So I know that I'm already in an incendiary space, but I'm just putting it out there already. As well as I have a company, Tabanka Dance Ensemble, or correctly, Tabanka African and Caribbean People's Dance Ensemble, which is the largest full-time Black dance company in Northern Europe, actively investing in Black talent and making sure that there's a space for that here in Europe. I think that's the short version.
And what have you been doing before? I mean, before you even left your island, what were you doing inside of your island? I mean, what was your experience like here?
Well, I had a kind of a back and forward kind of thing. So was there when I was 1, left to Scandinavia, came back to live with my grandfather, left again. But I've been doing several things. I've danced behind artists like Tina and Sean Paul and Shaggy and Usher and so on for that part of the career. And then as a soloist as well in stage dance.
Okay, excellent.
When I was in Trinidad, I was very shortly in Belmont, Freetown.
Oh, nice.
So Thomas, you said Tabanka. What does Tabanka means when you listen in public in your Scandinavian term, or is it a local term?
Well, of course, it's a Trinidadian term, but interestingly, in Trinidad, if you ask old timers, there's 7 stages of Tabanka. So there's different types of Tabanka. Yes. And then, so it's the longing. So it represents everything that we were longing for and didn't have here in Scandinavia, but also in the Cape Verde Islands in Africa. Tabanka is a music form, and the word means community. So it has an African meaning and it has a Caribbean meaning. So that's why we chose the name.
Well, Mr. Lindsay didn't really talk about his company, but he has a company also. But so before we go on to the next guest, Mr. Lindsay, you want to elaborate on your company?
Yeah. So I, with my ex-wife, founded a company 25 years ago, Koba Collective of Black Artists. And the company was founded based on sort of the realities here of racism and a lack of diversity in terms of movement that express an African aesthetic. Gregor can definitely bear me out. When we came to Toronto, Black dance or African-based dance was almost non-existent. It was ballet, contemporary, no jazz. And so we wanted to create a space and a platform where our work can be seen, our history danced, and have a professional. So I also and I have a technique come from a very different perspective. It's much focused on developing and using the body as an aesthetic for African movement. So it was interesting because I have logged into a couple of shows and I keep hearing you all saying that, the Caribbean folk isn't codified. It is. I have done it for over 25 years ago. You just haven't picked it up yet.
We sure will. After tonight's show, we'll get it.
Interesting. We're coming back to that. Yes.
Well, talking about Black dance, my God, the next guest, he's a former Best Village dance tutor and choreographer, a long-standing member of the Astor Johnson Repertory Dance Theatre, and a fellow alumni and scholarship winner at the School of the Toronto Dance Theatre. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend advisor, Mr. Patrick Parson. Hi, Patrick. I don't know where the advisor come from, but you advise him anytime. I don't know if it's right, but you advise me. Go ahead.
Well, Gregory, now you are a candidate for a PhD. So, of course, I guess the advisement went further than we ever expected to go, right?
So, Patrick, tell us a little about yourself, sir. I know you have a long list, but you'll keep it short because the thing is only 3 hours long for the most.
I'll keep it pretty short. I grew up in Success Village where music you walk down the street and the steel pan will be coming over the hills. You walk down the street and then you'll hear the drums playing from the Orisha tents. And then you will visit the Orisha tents and see the dancers dancing and getting into trance and moving in all the different African idioms of the Orishas. And then, then it's Best Village time. And I was little. So when the drum play, I walk to the community center and I'll be sitting there watching it until late and get home and get my ass cut. Sorry. Right? Right? So that was my first part of getting into the culture. Plus, my parents was part of what we call parang music, the Moonlight Serenaders. And if you know about the Moonlight Serenaders, they were like one of the top group. And that's my family. My grandparents, my grandmothers were singers. My father was a maracas player. So I come from a long cultural family. I danced with Jane Coggins. I danced with Astor Johnson, Best Village choreograph. Miss Wong Song took me under her wings and was sending me all over south and north of Trinidad to teach groups that having problems. So I came from a long way. But what really pushed me to move away was I wanted to see more. And with dancing with Astor Johnson, he gave me the opportunity to tour.
You make me do some African dance steps here, boy.
And that's what opened up my eyes. And after
a little technical.
Hey, something is happening there. I'm not seeing you guys anymore, but
Not seeing us.
but we get a blackout.
It's frozen.
Okay, it's back. Everybody's back.
Okay, it's back.
Okay.
Right. Yes. And and one time I was talking to Gregoire, and he said, you know what? I told him I want to travel and go and study somewhere. And he said, Canada has a place like a nice school there. And I did the research and I realized it was really virgin ground. So I auditioned and they gave me a full scholarship and I came and there was no turning back. A couple years after, I created a company called Ballet Creole because when I look on the stage in Toronto, I couldn't see myself and people like myself. And, Bakary, you can attest to all of that, right? And since that, we've been pushing, I would say, I don't want to use the word black dance, but culturally diverse dance into the mainstream for the past 30 years. Create a school of performing arts that was very diverse until we lose our space. I think that's where I will stop. Anything else you ask me later on? Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for sharing.
Mindy, it's a beauty that although I was in Canada, I was also in the Ballet Creole Dance Company, and I mean that was an amazing company.
Yes, so, you were a founding member. You have to tell them you were a founding member.
Not to say founding, Patrick, 30 years is good. I will.
Well, guys, up next, we have a gentleman here who is known and respected for his vision, his professionalism, and commitment to excellence. A member of the Belize National Dance Company, our next guest served as a senior lecturer at the Edna Manley College for the Visual Arts in Kingston, Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome on SOCA TV, Mr. Jamie Thompson.
Hi,
Good night,
Jamie.
Mr. Jamie.
Hi, hello, how are you?
Good night. So,
Good
our
night.
viewing audiences may not know much about you. I want you to give them a little idea of how you got into the business of the arts and where you are, where you are now.
Right now? Okay, so I'm from the beautiful country of Belize. That's where I was born and raised. I left Belize in 2007 to pursue a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Dance and Choreography. After I finished that successfully, I became a member of the Dallas Black Dance Theater in Dallas, Texas. My experience spanned from directing musicals. I directed a performing arts conservatory for 2 years, also in Texas. I was a visiting lecturer in Manly for the fall of 2018. And currently, I am a member of the Lion King on Broadway here in New York.
Impressive.
Whoa.
Lovely.
Wow, Belize, Belize, Belize.
Well,
Yes.
we'll want to hear a little bit more about your culture in Belize and how it has contributed to your career a little later on.
Okay.
Well, coming from Belize, you know, the Garifuna.
Garifuna.
Right, the Garifuna.
Yes.
The Garifuna, you did any dances? So let me learn anything from them?
Oh, of course. The Garifuna culture is so strong and so prominent in our country. It is almost impossible to not wear their identity as our own. The unique thing about Belize is that we have so many cultures, but it's all, to a certain level, it is nationalized. So we all enjoy the Spanish food, the Spanish music. We all enjoy the Garifuna food, the Garifuna music. And so it was always an integral part of our cultural studies as well. Our performing arts studies, all the different cultures and their dances are sort of weaved into that experience. So it's one of my favorite dances to do.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, great. Now this next guest. Wow. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce him because I remember dancing one of my favorite dances to date. It was called Down But Not Out. He was the choreographer of this dance. Okay, he's a former member of the Laissez-Faire Dance Company under the guidance of course, South's great Dame Joyce Curtin. Former Teen Talent finalist. I remember him on Teen Talent dancing. And a member of the Pleasantville Folk Performers also, the Metamorphosis Dance Company, Noble Douglas Dance Company, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and buddy in dance, Mr. Richard Lessey. Hi, Richard. I don't know how to say hello in Norwegian, but I'll just say hi. I haven't seen you in ages. I mean,
I know.
Well, let us tell the audience a little about yourself and remind me about who you are.
Well, I mean, as you said, a lot of my training was done in Trinidad. I studied in Liverpool, went back to Trinidad. I choreographed a lot for schools. I did a lot of work in primary and secondary schools, and that has kind of continued. I moved to Norway. I was the head of the dance department at my first school, and then moved in 2008 to be the head of the dance department and assistant associate professor at another university college. Mostly I have maybe focused on, yes, a bit more on musical theater. So that the last university I was at, we offered Norway's first bachelor's degree in musical theater. So I was responsible for getting the dance curriculum and the syllabus together for that. Also the musical theater syllabus and curricula. I myself have kind of ventured more into musical theater. 2009, I did The Lion King in Germany. In 2013, I did La Cage aux Folles in Denmark. And then for the past 2 years, 2017 to 2019, I was in the Book of Mormon in Norway. And I've recently, last year, moved to London to pursue a MFA in choreography, which would be my second master's. So I have one in education, centering on dance training, and now doing another in choreography. So kind of spanning the both sides of my professional context.
Excellent. I mean, we have 3 Lion King candidates here on the same screen. I hope you all get together and do a dance for us later on. Maybe the dance on Simba.
I'm not getting sued. I am not getting sued.
I just want to say Richard since Richard was being, humble. David Byer, Jeffrey Carter, Arlene Wilkes, Tony Ferraz, and Richard Lessey has shaped most of the jazz here in Norway. They are the people who really shaped it here. So Norwegian jazz is predominantly shaped by Trinidadian excellence. I just have to put it down and say it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
And Richard
And
was
mind you-
very helpful in building my company.
I was just about to say that being with Thomas's company also helped me hold on to the little Trini roots and culture in Scandinavia. So that was also quite nice to have that opportunity.
But it's a great pleasure that both you all shaped jazz, because most of you all came out of the Best Village, with Jeffrey Carter being one of our first ever best male dancer in Best Village way back in 1972. So, and then you, Richard, Best Village boy. So the Best Village Trophy competition have done a lot for people in Trinidad and Tobago who have now resided abroad and they have taken out there in the communities and so forth. So good venture. Very, very nice list.
Guys, I would want to invite on our screen our lone female panelist for this evening. She's a New York, Port of Spain-based dance artist and founding director of the Dance and Performance Institute, Trinidad and Tobago. She's a dancer, choreographer, artist, artistic director, writer, and curator. Many of us would know her from the summer intensives, dance intensive that we would have had in Trinidad under the New Wave Institute. That was held in Napa, many summers. I myself participated in one of those. Join me, viewers, in welcoming Miss Makeda Thomas to our SOCA TV screen. Welcome, Makeda.
Hi, sweetie. How are you, Makeda?
Getting applause from everybody.
Everybody applauding Makeda.
So nice to see you. I know you are back here with us in Trinidad. I know I would have seen you on the street sometimes. I'm very glad that you are here and on our screen tonight to give us some insight into, your experiences abroad. Can you just give our viewing audience a little bit, a little insight into your experiences, how you got into the arts in the first place and where you are at now?
Mindy, first of all, I only see you at Emancipation.
That's on the street. Beautiful.
Every year. Right. So I as you wonderfully read, the daughter of Hanson Malcolm, who is one of the founders of Nantambu Drummers based in South. I am the granddaughter of Alma Woods, who, if she didn't play mass on a carnival Monday and Tuesday, would cry all month. I am the cousin of Jacqueline Henry, who was the first person who, when asked what she did, who was she? She said, I'm a dancer. She was the first person I ever met that answered, I'm a dancer. My mother is a teacher. So that is where I come from. And I have, over the, dating myself, over 2 decades, the last 20 years, engaged in dance not only as a performer, in companies like Ronald K. Brown Evidence, Urban Bushwoman, and then I worked with Rennie Harris, amongst many other sort of independent, non-company dance makers, and then started to make my own work in about 2002, 2003. Started that process on the African continent, and let's say 12, 13 years later, after my father passed, which is where it began, decided it's time to move home and do the work here. So that's me.
Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know what to say about this panel. I'll just use Terry Springer's words. Par excellence.
Yes, if you had seen these bios, they were too much to read. They were very long. All the accolades, all the awards, all the achievements. I'm very impressed, and I'm really excited to have this discussion here with you this evening, guys. And the viewers, don't leave us. You will learn a lot.
Well, into the question time, people. This is the time where the air is rare. So we're going. So would you say that in recent times, because all of you all are international based right now, in recent time that there has been a decline in consumers' interest in dance when compared to other forms of entertainment. What do you all think about dance as a forefront in the international market? Don't all answer at once. Let's go, Bakary.
I think geography dictates different realities. It's very different in our spaces. So I will speak specifically from the Canadian perspective and a bit of the US perspective because I do work there, not a lot, but a little. I think I would say right off, yeah. I mean, I have seen in the 20, 30 years here working in the dance industry, there has definitely been a decline in terms of the consumption of dance by the general public. We know ballet and sort of the historical forms have their market and they continue to thrive in that particular area. But I find when it comes to other forms, I mean, we're lucky here in Canada. We have a huge, diverse range of forms, all working professionally. You have South Asian dance companies that are 50 years old. You have Spanish dance companies 30 and 40 years old. You have, and you have African dancers and ballet Creole, Koba, Nyaka Nyaka, who's 25, 30 years old coming along. And many years ago, we would be able to do a full week, a full evening run, a full week run of concerts and be sold out. Now it's difficult to even sell out 3 nights. And in terms of funding, we talk about sort of the racism in funding. It's continuous. Again, dance that comes from what we call the other here, because we're always considering there's ballet funding, there's modern funding, and then there's other forms. There's contemporary, but even within the contemporary, there's a huge line. And so therefore within funding, you're competing with companies that are getting, $500 to $1 million grant, and you're getting a $50,000 grant, but the quality has to be the same. When you put in an application, the quality, the expectation is the same, and we do it. We come from a history and a legacy of oppression where we know we can thrive and rise up from the bottom. So we present phenomenal work under those conditions. But at the end of the day, as Gregor says, there is a lack of consumer. And, and the general public still also see the work with a very, it's still very colonialized. So they come to certain works with an idea of, well, they're going to see Black work and it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be, any work that's Black, that's challenging, you don't get an audience for, even within your Black community. So I'll leave it there and sort of let other perspectives jump in, and I'll jump in a little later.
Talawa.
Okay, well, I also work with audience development. So I work at the House of Dance, the main stage for dance in Norway, but I also consult for the Norwegian audience development. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because of that, I get a lot of access of international numbers of audience. What is really interesting during COVID is actually that 57% of the people who have bought dance tickets online are not people who go to stages and watch dance. So that actually means that the dance audience has grown during COVID, not decreased. What is also interesting is that Black dance is winning. So Black dance is selling more tickets than other forms of dance, and as well dance classes within Black dance forms, including actually SOCA and SOCA Fit and all of these different concepts that are going, is again actually winning. So I think that it's actually a good chance for us to reclaim some of our audiences, because what has really happened, and I've studied the case of both Canada, the case in the States and the case in Britain, the Caribbean dance companies especially used to be community-based, but then gentrification and desegregation severed that link between the companies and the community, and the stages are predominantly white and they do not pull the same audience as we pull. So we also have to do more work than other people. So when you have a Black dance company, you have to do the work of the community communication department at the stage, because they don't even know how to write about your stuff. And you need to get the photos, and so you are doing 12 people's job while your white contemporaries get to just be artists. And that's also the part of the problem, because sometimes we're trained and we're told in school that we can just be artists like everyone else. That is not true. We have to do a lot more. In Norway, they keep getting shocked. We have 98% ticket coverage. So we predominantly sell out. But it's because I've never, ever let the stages have any kind of control when it comes to selling my tickets, because I know they don't reach the audience I need. But I'm tired, and it costs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's what we should be doing. We need strong organizations. We need to pool our resources into strong organizations that can continuously do audience development for Caribbean dance, for African dance, for Black dance, whichever tag you want to give it. Because as long as we leave it to them, it will never ever happen, and we will still continue to just be festival entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Parsons.
Yeah, I will talk from the concept of what I've been seeing coming back to my homeland, and also what I see here in Toronto. The consumerism that is happening is that I don't think they're paying the kind of fees that is needed for these companies to survive. So in that way, there's less activities for us to get involved with to keep these companies vibrant. I remember 20 years ago here, we had performances regularly, in all different venues, and there was money there. As there are more companies evolve, they become a monopoly between fees. And so in that way, the consumer is looking for as much as they can get for the buck. So they will pay less to get more. And that is creating a problem for us internationally from what I'm seeing. I mean, I've been to the UK. I don't see the venues for where there's lots of blacks in dance performing. There's very few. Even in Cuba, where dance is really a strong thing, there it's dying in the theater. And I'm talking about theater dance. If you look at festival dance, it has a little more growth, but where theater dance is concerned, I think that something has to be done to build that back up, because it's the three big, I would say, big giants that is getting the work, and that's the symphony, and that's the opera, and that's the ballet company. So where do we fit in this time, and how do we change the dynamics, and how do we change the language to show that we are as important and vibrant as the big three? That's what I'm seeing. So I am asking, what kind of verbiage and what do we have to do to change that? I know in Norway, as you say, Thomas, that is growing for you. Here, I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. So there's lots of questions I am asking at this time, and how do we build it in with this time that we have, this COVID-19? How do we build so that we can be a force as this pandemic changes? And I'll leave it there.
Well, Makeda, I know you've been doing a lot for. I really listened to the Baba. I went to Oshun Festival, Thanksgiving on Sunday, and the Baba said, "Stop saying black. Give it a name. Say African." Because what he was saying, and I think it make a lot of sense, is that he was saying that you recognize the East Indian by saying Indian dance, but we just say black dance. So I know you have done a lot of African dance. And I know you have done a lot of workshopping and so forth. So let's hear about your experience with consumerism.
Well, this will definitely address that, but I'm going to jump back a moment to what Thomas was talking about, which was about doing the work, and forwarding to Patrick, who talked about verbiage. So it was quite surprising to me that as we entered in the discussion, now I'm thinking about verbiage and doing the work, as we entered the discussion, it jumped out to me that the philosophers noted were Plato and Aristotle. And I said, so this is where we're going to start, really, for a conversation that's going to center us, right? Because that's what I'm here for. Okay. And so I think that Bakary also mentioned about something about colonized audiences. And so we can't expect more from audiences than we are prepared as makers and researchers and teachers to do. I think that in this particular sort of political, social, cultural moment that is happening globally, and we're talking about dance in an international market, so we're going to say that Trinidad is part of the globe.
Yes.
There is an effort to think about and engage all the ways that we can decolonize. So let's not miss this moment. And to see it as an opportunity to engage decolonization as a process that will ultimately benefit us as Caribbean dance makers and doers and supporters of other art. I think the other thing that jumped out to me as we entered into this conversation is, yes, I'm the only woman on this panel, aside from Mindy, who was hosting.
Congratulations.
But it was really noted. It was really noted. And I saw a Facebook post, and it was like, Mr. Thomas Talawa, Presto, Mr. So-and-so, Miss Makeda Thomas, and I was like, oh, how? That's new. That's really new. Because again,
Anthony Gael.
Yeah, there's sort of these, again, there's these sort of global conversations about identity and politics and how we want to identify people and why. And if that's to be noted, why not other things? Rather than miss whether or not it's a Mr. or Mrs., perhaps some information about where we were from might have been more useful. And that's just observation. It's okay. My children are hungry.
What's going on with you?
They've been snacking on fruit. They'll be all right. Right. So there's another way in which we can again engage sort of what's happening globally and not sort of fester on the past so much, but to start to open up a space so we can imagine. I'm all into futurity, and so I'm here for the level of the conversation. So,
what about the consumer in dance in recent times? What about the consumer? What about consumerism of the dance in these times? Let's forget the past and talk about now.
Yes, I've seen. I mean, I for myself have struggled quite a bit with the sort of options we have for transcending dance, and I know that will change as different countries deal with COVID-19, but it's been really difficult for me to sort of engage the Zoom format, really, really difficult. And I think, that's connected to the work that I make as an artist, which has an element of spirit that doesn't translate. It's embodied practice, again, requires proximity that's sort of disabled in this space. So I'm still thinking about it. I don't have a feeling of anxiety to do anything right now. So perhaps I'm less concerned with consumerism. I'm sort of in a space like it all needs to fall anyway, because we're in such a moment of where everything is. We're talking about what it means to make dance, in a more conscious way. What it means. What do theaters have to do? What do dance presenters have to do? How can dance companies not be so? Yes. Yeah. So we're still. I feel like we're in a moment of thinking. So, yeah.
Okay.
If I can add in there.
Jamie, I would love to hear your thing.
Yes. So my experience I've moved from I've been able to swim back and forth from the stage to administration to behind the scenes across my experience. And what that did was it gave me a unique perspective in terms of consumerism. The school that I went to, their forms were completely European. I studied Vaganova technique. I studied Graham, Horton, Limon, Alexander technique, Feldenkrais. And so because of that, the minute I left my country, I had a complete contrast experience. And I had to learn how to deal with tucking away my instinctive experience and embracing a new experience so that I can participate in this universal language. Moving forward into the opportunities that I had to be able to lead organizations or to consult in administration, I realized what we do as diversified people. We are trying to filter our work into a system that wasn't created around our needs. It wasn't created around how we communicate. It's not created around how and why we dance. And so trying to fit our cultural experience into a box, aka the proscenium stage, or we only could perform in these venues, what it costs to even get in. We're not talking about what we pay the choreographers, we're not talking about what we pay the dancers, we're not even talking about getting the true costumes that will depict the truth behind what we're doing. And so what we've been doing for all these years is to fit into a vehicle that wasn't meant to carry us, right? And so I feel like I agree 150% with what Makeda has shared. I'm like, this is the time for us to move, to take the opportunity to begin to do the work. The thing is, we're gonna have to become disenchanted with the system that the European structure has built. We want to be in these big theaters. Well, listen, for so many years, for centuries, they've been working on that structure. For so many years, there's some countries who the endowments for the arts comes from the federal government. In certain places, you have to go through philanthropy, private donations, right? And so for us now, we have to figure out, well, we're somewhere in between the federal or the governmental support and private support. And so then we're going to have to decide which hybrid of a lane will we construct to get ourselves the attention, the opportunity, the resources, and the audience that we need. I feel like it's almost a waste of conversation to beat the dead horse, because the answers are going to be the same, right? What we don't want to face, and I'm trying to ease it in there because I don't want to. I'm not suggesting that any of our administrators on here are drunk from the proscenium. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we, because my entire professional experience has been in ballet, contemporary, and modern dance companies, right? So I've been in that. So I will be hypocritical if I say it is not glamorous and there's not a adrenaline rush and there's no prestige in it. There is full prestige in that. But because I have had that experience, I know that there is room for us to create another structure or structures. It doesn't even have to be one or the other. It could be multiple ways of how we can ensure that the consumerism of our dance is always a direct outcome of the elements that are pertaining to us, and so I feel like that I feel like that's what needs to happen. It's hard for us to look at those factors because, again, from the root, those factors were not made in consideration of how we celebrate. I find it amazing that Thomas is able to sell 98% of his tickets, and I mean, I'm sure that takes that's a 24-hour job, right? And just the fact that you're able to do that in a system that wasn't meant to support you means that you have in your brain, just you in your brain, that you have the capacity to sit down and innovate if you're given the space, right? And sometimes that innovation may come when we decide to divorce ourselves from those systems, because you can't do both. You will not be able to do both, right? You either have to say, you know what, it's a 5-year plan. 2021 is my last year presenting in this theater. I will spend the rest of this year and all of 2021 innovating space, innovating strategies, innovating communication strategies, innovating different funding systems that would best suit us so that we don't have to bend over backwards to just do the bare minimum.
Well, we go back to Thomas Talawa word, a beautiful word which I always love to say. I could coin it if I want to because I'm a doctorate. I could coin it. It's called the gentrification of dance.
Yes.
And that could take up a whole night. Mm-hmm. But it's going there, but we'll see how it goes. So let's say I know Richard had a great thing because the musical theater scene has been so widely used during this COVID. So Richard, how did the consumerism in dance affected you, or did it? Let me hear a little about your.
I think drawing on what both Makeda and Jamie have said is kind of what I'm going through at the moment. I mean, I literally left my life in Norway to become a student again, to reinvent myself and how I see myself as an artist, really. And working within those structures that Jamie talked about, which is fine. But I've had to, over the past year, kind of look at what kind of artist I want to be, because I've never had to do that. I've always taught, I've always been a choreographer in schools or for companies. I've always worked within their agenda. So like one of our first assignments at uni was to choreograph a dance on the way you move. And that struck me because I was like, how do I move? I've spent most of my life choreographing on other bodies. Yes, the movement may come from me, but it's honed by the people that I'm teaching or the people, so it was a shock so I'm kind of reinventing and refining myself as an artist, and I guess bringing myself back to where I started, and going into innovating and changing. And I have to say that at least being Trinidadian and all this stuff that we have to do and put up with makes us able to do all the things. I listen to all these people who have companies and have to do everything themselves. And being Trinidadian, being a dancer in Trinidad, having to sometimes do your own costumes or choreograph, find music, do your lights, and and you're trusting it. When I moved to Norway, it was, people were shocked at the wealth of experience, the number of things that we could do, and I was like, because we have to.
Yes.
I would never forget. I mean, people Miss Curtin coming to me as a 15-year-old, and she was like, Richard, here's the intermediate company. You're choreographing a dance, vetiver. There you go. And I was like, but I had great teachers. So after the initial shock of, oh my God, I have to do a dance, or I have to choreograph a dance, my first, and it was, I had to do the lights myself, costuming. I mean, she was there over my shoulder, but it was mine. We are trust in the situations. We are made to do this. If it's one thing being an artist in Trinidad, you are made to do this. You come out on the other side knowing, you know what, this is what I was meant to be, and this is how I have to work this to make this happen. And where the consumerism of dance, dance audiences are suffering all over. I worked in the ballet school and the National Opera, and it's always an interesting conversation there. Dance is suffering, and a lot of the audience just don't get dance. They don't understand what they're seeing. We need as artists and as practitioners to bring that back. We, as Jamie Wright said, we have to innovate. We have to create stuff that makes people want to come back to the theater. And we need to start having those conversations, because there's a lot of, I've gone to dance shows, and I have to say there's a lot of what I call intellectual wank going on. You need a PhD, or you need a degree to understand, or you have to read an A4 essay on what is being put on stage. And I'm not a stupid person, and at times I'm like, what have I just seen? What have you just tried to see?
They're not making, is that they are not projecting their work or towards an audience friendly. They are more doing it for themselves and to hell with the audience. Is that what you're trying to say?
At times I get that feeling, and it's very interesting that at uni now we're having a lot of discussion on spectatorship and how much you give to an audience, how much you expect from them, what you expect them to see, those kind of conversations. So, I don't know how we get to that point.
Hey, Richard, say what you have to say. You're free on SOCA TV, don't hide back. I've never heard you. I've never heard you fighting for words in all your life. Come on, say what you have to say and stop holding back.
And part of my wanting to move to the UK is that dance in Norway was frustrating me. Because I wasn't understanding it.
I'll take a drink with Makeda for that.
And it got to the point where I was wondering, okay, am I too old? Has dance moved on that much that I am not enjoying seeing something that I have burnt my whole life for? And coming to uni has kind of restarted that conversation of what we think dance is, what it should be, what it means, what it should do. And it's interesting to be in that conversation. So I'm quite interested to see what happens in my second year and when I graduate, and what avenues I then travel. But as has come up here so many times, innovation and creation are going to be paramount in how we move forward. Not only as dance as a genre, but dance of the African and the Caribbean. How do we see dance on a Black body? What do they see when they see Black bodies dancing?
That's the question.
Because we have to get to the point where we're not exotic. We're coming to see exotic. And sometimes Thomas talked about 98% coverage, but sometimes in that audience, and I said, I have danced for him, you get that feeling that people have come to see Black bodies on stage. And that,
not the work,
for me, riles me more than anything else.
Edison could tell you about that because they used to come to watch Edison body all the time. Bakary?
Richard, in a sense, you have answered somewhat my following question. Now we have some local dancers who are, I'm seeing them making comments and stuff like that, and some of them are aspiring to create their own companies, to perform locally and abroad. But I want to know, how ready are they, from our local experiences, how ready are they to perform or to run companies abroad? I want to find out from you all, to what extent has your experiences in your own native land, in your early years, to what extent has that prepared you for your experiences outside, or influenced what you produce outside, whether it be choreography, whether it be business planning, whether it be, anything that you marketing, the way that you market. I just want to get a sense of, are we doing a good job locally? To what extent has your experience influenced what you are doing outside, or has prepared you for what you are experiencing now?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I start. Yeah, since I'm not the only one that's not a Trinidadian. I'm honored.
Well, you're not a Trinidadian. I was coming to that. You are Caribbean because Belize is being bordered by the Caribbean Sea, so you're a Caribbean man.
That's why I said native land, because I don't want to say Trinidadian.
I almost got left out until you said that. What I enjoy about now in Belize, in comparison to what I was expected to know at my placement class at the university level, I think if we're using a rubric of universal standards, I was in some ways behind, right? However, I think it was my drive and my exuberance that saved me. However, when I look when I look back at my career, the seed for each experience that I've had, I started back home in Belize. When I produced a show, I did that back home in Belize when I was 18 years old. Before I came to the States, I was able to study teacher education. So a lot of my teachings came from my experience there. I used to work for the National Institute of Culture and History, which is our main body that governs and preserves our arts and culture in the country. And me being able to do plays, to go out to the schools and teach, to be able to sing, dance, and drum, definitely shaped my experience in hindsight. We might say, oh, well, I didn't have enough ballet training, but that is not the litmus test anymore. I may not have had a certain level. I know some Caribbean schools like to do the Royal, what is it?
Academy of Dance.
The Royal Academy of Dance. Yeah, and so that is great. I think that is fascinating. But if we don't want to replace that as our standard, because the dynamic, I think somebody said that, I think Richard said that earlier, when the costume making, the lighting design, some of us can sing really well, we can compose music. I feel like that, to me, has a lot more weight. I do believe that of course the education, you cannot replace it, but I do give a lot of homage to the variation of our experiences, the way it's made up. You can't just be a dancer in the Caribbean. That doesn't work that way. You have to act, you have to sing, you have to dance, you have to understand music. We also have to be able to teach and teach well, right? We don't sit from a chair and bang a stick on the floor and call steps out. It's a community experience. It is it's a spiritual experience. And I believe that all of those things that I possess, that I have possessed over my career, and the way I approach it now, and where I will continue to approach it, all those seeds were sown back home.
Nice. Thank you, Patrick. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, the thing
I know you're part of Best Village. I want to know if it makes sense.
I was going to say that, being a Trinidadian, growing up with, it comes from Best Village and the best of Best Village. And as Mr. Richard said, we had good teachers and directors. We had lots of them, and they study outside. They were academians, they were lecturers, you know, and they research the work. You know, Best Village was not just a competition, it was a school. It was a school to train the individual, which we didn't know at the time, to be the best they can be in the village, right? You will see you do music, dance, and drama, and you have all these directors who you're learning from how they manipulate and create and structure. So you're learning all of this. And Best Village for me, was a solid tool, a solid institute for the dance artists in Trinidad. Most of us here, except Makeda, I think, didn't do Best Village. I'm not sure, right? And
but we'll know from her later.
I'm not a Best Village baby.
I say I'm not sure. I say I'm not sure, right?
I know.
Bakary can talk more about that, and you know that just being, creating, doing costumes, watching directions, warming up a class. They will ask you to warm up a class for the teacher. Give you all these tools. Plus, you had to work, and your work where you were working was either in administration, marketing somewhere, or labor, where you structure things and make it work. Money was not a problem, so we make it work with whatever money we had. So we had this basic training that a university students will get from years of, we had years of it, and most of them have only 3 or 4 years. And I will leave it there because Best Village for me is the tool that gave me what I have, plus my family, because I came from a family of 7, and the structure, my mom working, father working, you learn how to direct people, how to work with people, how to pass on information, plus I was part of Carnival and Steel Pan, making costumes, it's so much. I don't know where to stop, it's a lot. Gregory, you understand all of that too, right?
All of us understand. I think all of you are here.
So without Best Village, I don't know if the dancers' home has all the tools to do what we have gone on to do. I'm not sure.
Okay, Bakary, can we just hear from you briefly?
Sort of going back to your question, I think if you look at the legacy of Trinidadians and I think Caribbean people on the whole that are working internationally, the talent is definitely there. We don't lack for talent. I think for me, when I came abroad, I became an activist. I had to become an activist, and I think what I would say to aspiring young choreographers, company directors, is to not be so complacent about your culture and the work that you're doing, and spend a lot of time really investigating, not just physically, but intellectually about what you're doing. Because not until I emigrated to Canada did I have to clearly define what my culture was. Right. I came into a city where my culture was sort of encapsulated by Caribana, which is one aspect. It's a festival, but all the folk tradition, the many nights, the hours, the years that I spent in those palais, going up to Moruga, going to Toko, doing all that research was not, I didn't see, there was no understanding of that. And so when I decided to put work that was Caribbean influence on stage, I said, over my dead body, would I just go on and choreograph a piece and have it be viewed with those same eyes? Right? Because the work that I was doing was not sort of embodied by a Caribana, sort of a nostalgic Caribbean lens. I wanted my work to have the validity, the the understanding, the historical context of being a Caribbean man, being a Caribbean person. So I spent a lot of years before I put my very first folk piece on stage. I spent a lot of years educating audiences, educating people about what Caribbean folk is, from it being, having technique, having history, having style, having very specific, realities about what it is before I put work on stage. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking about, even within a Caribbean context, about start looking at your work with a lot more analytical eye, as opposed to just sort of, well, I'm a Best Village dancer, I learn a piqué, I learn a ballet, and I go on a jam, a drummers play, and we have a good time. Start investigating movement, looking at comparative analysis of the different dances, looking at the historical context, looking at the connections to the African context, the South Asian context, the Spanish context, looking at the colonialism of that work and how that work has evolved or not evolved based on history, just investigate, do deeper investigation, because if you want to come and have your work be valued internationally, you will have to be able to stand up many times and defend it from that context.
I hope our local dancers are listening.
Yes,
Thank
local
you.
dancers.
I want to add something, folks.
Sure.
And this is also to address something. I saw a comment from Terry Springer. And it's aligned with what Bakary was now saying, that there has to be some range other than celebratory for a traditional practice. So the other day, I got into a small conversation with another local dance artist based here in Trinidad about smiling even during a wake dance, smiling during anything, smiling when we do lovely Caribbean dances. And my question was, what are we smiling for? And I got a sort of off the cuff reply like, life is good, we should all smile. But I'm looking for something deeper. This is my work, this is my practice, this is my life. And to say just smile, especially if it's coming from a man to a woman telling me to smile. I'm practicing my art, my politics, my whole entire way of life is problematic. And this is how we speak and engage about dance in our local spaces. And again, I'm going to go back to us, being more responsible for the environment in which we exist. It's not just done to us. Many of us are implicit, and it requires a deeper observation, a truthfulness, more critique, as Bakary was saying, more analysis. Look at your stuff, complicate your own stuff, ask questions. Is it perfect? Is it great? Is it historical? Is it ahistorical? Is it gendered? Is it There's a million different ways which you could dismantle something and put it back together, so that when you have to present it in an international marketplace, you know what you are talking about.
Well,
Agreed.
I'm glad you did say that, because
I must agree.
Empirical evidences. I mean, at one time I was in a competition and I was dancing to this song, Sparrow's song, I'm a Slave. His calypso, I'm a Slave, and the dance was intense. And the judge was sitting there trying to make me smile, and I'm like, oh, why would I smile through I'm a Slave? So they think that all Caribbean dances are really supposed to be smiling, and you're correct. They are certain. If you're in the right feeling and you have the passion for what you're doing, you will get the right mood out. Needless to say, we're going to our next question. Now, I look at these strategies implemented by various sports organizations, such as Manchester United, my favorite team, Manchester United in football, right? They would attain the ability to analyze the internal and external environment by investigating market demand and also making strategic decisions that will enhance the success of their business or team. Now, can dance companies use these strategies also to enrich or enhance the successes of their businesses? What do you all think about that? Can we use that kind of strategy in dance? Because right now football is millions they're talking about. I mean, somebody would trade or even sell or buy a player for millions of dollars, but we in Trinidad and Tobago, well, you all do the talking. I'll just do the questioning. you're the panelists. Anyone?
Yes,
Well,
Tom.
I will say yes. Yes, you can. And I know it's kind of cursing in the church because the arts doesn't really like to talk about money. But I think we also do have to, because people have children, people have bills, people have housing, people need to survive. So we also need to talk about the money side of it. And that's also why I said I do audience development. And just like Richard says, the audience is mixed, but I know exactly who my audience are. And I have approximately 500 to 600 audiences that feed back in forms after every single performance round. So I actually know what the white people are seeing, and I know what the Desi or Indian people are seeing, and I know what the black people are seeing. And that's also why I laughed when Makeda talked about smiling, because the initial pushback I got from almost all the audience was, why am I not just creating Happy Carnival choreography? And now it has changed because you've spent the time to educate the audience, and now they really appreciate that you're giving them more levels. But that has been a 10-year process of really teaching the young and the old and the different ethnicities and so on how to do it, and also how to be an audience together. And the balance is yet to be completely made, but it's different to be on stage now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. You're not as exotic, you're not as othered, and so on. But I think it's definitely possible to use some of those strategies. Branding is important. If you go on my webpage, tabankadance.com, you will see that there's these kind of technological elements that are flying around. And you might say, what does that have to do with dance? Well, that is me actually answering stupid questions before they're asked. Because they think that because you're doing black dance, and well, I say black because some call it black. I use the term Africana dance myself because it's from African philosophy and cosmology that I pull from. They think that you're in a locked tradition. But when they come to the webpage and they see this kind of technological thing, you're instantly contemporary. Because I realized that one of the struggles that we had was to place ourselves in modernity and in the contemporary. And that is one of the ways that they keep putting us out, because it's only really cultural heritage, meaning ballet, because that is their cultural heritage, or it's their contemporary that is being funded. So if you don't place yourself in those categories, you put yourself outside of the funding. And I like Miss Lou from Jamaica. She called it colonizing in reverse. And that's also one of the things I'm doing pertaining to what Jamie talked about. Meaning, so one of the reasons why I am on the main stage at the House of Dance is not because I believe it's at any higher form of art than what I can do in any other space. It's just I believe it's as much my right to be there as it's theirs. So I will claim the space for the future generation and be there naturally and colonize it in reverse. The same way as I would have a goal to access every single type of funding that Norway can provide, because it's as much my right and my dancer's right to get that funding as anyone else's. But I've also gone a really alternative route. Richard knows we had the largest night contract in the country. Art dance didn't go for night contracts. We had a contract with Lebara Mobile, a mobile company. That also is not done. So we've done things very differently here than what is usually done, because we are creatives. And for some reason, we have a tendency to forget that we are creatives, and that really branding is also what we do, and experience is what we do. And reaching not only past the fourth wall, but past the skin is what we do. And we allow everyone else to take our creativity and use it to brand them. Hip hop, product placement started in hip hop. That's why you know exactly what they're drinking, what they're driving, where they're living, which brand of pants they're wearing, and so on. And that's now how the people in the TV series and the shows are getting money, because streaming doesn't have advertisement because it's product placed. That came from our forms of music and dance. We can also do this kind of product placement if we want to. And all of this I would say, if we want to, and if it is what do you call it, within our morals, and it coexists with what we do. For example, so just so that I'm clear, so I'm not saying sell your soul. I'm just saying be creative about how to survive and survive proudly.
But I go back to Richard. Richard said something earlier on about the contemporary, and my problem with that is I feel contemporary came and we didn't reach it because although I understand some of the dances, I mean it's like um putting modern dance in the era of ballet, and people will not understand when people didn't understand it at the time, and they were up against it. So I really feel that everything now goes where you think that everything I do, without thought, without concept, without any good content, you just put it on stage, and if for want of a better word, we say, oh, it's contemporary. So, Richard, let me hear your statement about this marketing issues.
I think it comes back to something that Bakary said as well, and Makeda, being able to talk about what you do. Yeah, I mean, Thomas talks about being able to get the funding. Thomas is able to talk the talk and write the write. He is able to fill out all the applications in the way that he knows, in the language, and we come back to Patrick, the verbiage that is needed to get money. You know, and being where he is, he's able to see all those. And being where I was in taking our school from a vocational school to university college, I was able to see how things were supposed to be written so the government can say yes. And it all comes down to branding and marketing, but you can only do that if you know, as Makeda and they said, do your research, be analytical, be able to stand up and say why I am doing this, what this is about. We have to, unfortunately, and this is the way of the world, justify why you have to give me money to do what I do. Why do you think you are worth it? Why is your company worthy to be seen? And it can't be just, I'm just going to put it on stage. Yeah, there needs to be, it's so important, that ability to analyze, to research, to understand, to dig deeper into what we're doing in order to market, because that's what Manchester United, also my favorite team, Gregory, had to do. They didn't just a football team. At the end of the day, Manchester United, they are a business. And they market themselves as a business.
So basically, you're saying to dancer to go beyond dancing, to go beyond just dancing on stage.
No, there's so much more. I mean, and we kind of touched that. I mean, I think that somebody had said that you can't just be a dancer. In the world we live in now, you can't just be a dancer.
I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out.
I need to say something.
Yeah.
Yes, Makeda.
So as I'm thinking and going and saying Candace Thompson's activities, it's two separate things though. Speaking about your work and analyzing your work and then being able to speak, funders speak to get the dollars are not the same thing.
True.
Before that though, I wanted to sort of to think about dance making specifically outside of the realm of nationalizing it. It's always like, oh, I'm making this dance for the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. It's like, just perhaps scale could be something that we could consider, and we just sort of give artists, dance makers, this space to make creative, complicated, political, messy, ridiculous, funny, provocative work without this idea of nation writing them to represent it. And this is where all the smiles comes from, right? So if instead we had sort of people digging in, for themselves as an artist, for the art of dance. Dance is so pushed aside here. You know, there have been entire creative industries with film and even fashion, and dance is nowhere a part of the conversation, you know? And so I offer us this space to center ourselves as dance artists. Forget nation, forget this, just go into the work. And that's, again, going back to the topic, what enables us to compete on the international market, because that's what those other artists are doing. They're not thinking about, oh, I'm representing the whole United States, or I'm representing the whole of France. They're making work, you know?
I wanted to ask a question about that in terms of the physical work, the work itself. I know you all said we have to go beyond the dance and be able to talk about it and analyze it and all of that, but specifically because we want to help out our local artists, you know, to prepare them or give them an idea of what they should be preparing to look for out there. I want to find out from you all if you have ever seen any of our local artists perform abroad, and if you think, I know we excel in our local markets. So here we say, whoosh, the real dance boy. She could real dance. Oh, you see those legs? Yes. But have you all ever seen our local artists dance abroad? And do you think that they are ready for the international market? I'm talking about the physical aspect of dance here now. In terms of our
challenge the whole local, because there's a kind of way that we are throwing away some of our or disconnecting from some of our greatest resources by this local and she outside. Like, okay, so I spend, you know, half of my life outside, and suddenly I'm of there, not of Trinidad, right? So I want to. And so I always like to poke holes in my own thinking, and you know, I want to poke holes into this whole idea of local. That's someone who is trained, like artists like Fauna Fraser, for example, who is trained very locally, right? And she goes and she's, you know, the what is she? Assistant director,
really. Yeah.
Okay, right. And she goes, and now she's not up here any longer. And I say, I reject that. It reminds me of being in a lecture. I was teaching a lecture at Ewing. Okay, just now. And no one in my she wants the iPad. No one in my lecture knew who Pearl Primus was. I mean, I wasn't even prepared for. I wasn't even prepared for that. I was like stuttering. I was like, you know, people talked about, you know, wanting to be a ballet dancers. They were 21 and 22 and 24 years old in my lecture, and they were still aspiring to be a ballet dancer. But Pearl Primus, who is like right there, like right there, is not even considered as a path for research, for scholarship, for how she made work. So I want to challenge that whole thing about local and sort of keeping people in these little boxes and perhaps allowing them to indulge in this amazing genealogy of Trinidadian dance makers or Caribbean dance makers that we have all over the world. Okay, that's
you know, it's nice that you say this, Makeda, but I believe that it's my belief that when a local dancer, not to no play on the word, when a local dancer goes abroad and they don't come back in about 15 and 20 years, I have find myself trying to explain one of the greatest dancers in Trinidad and Tobago called Natalie Rogers.
Right, yes.
And Natalie Rogers have done so much on the local scene. And then she got called over into Garth Fagan's company. But she haven't been coming here and giving workshops and doing things. So the younger dancers don't know about her. And I am trying to explain to them who Natalie Rogers is, and they can't comprehend. So I still believe that even if you go abroad, you still should come back in the interim and pass on something to your natives. I hope you're doing that, Mr. Billy's, and go Mr. Billy's, I hope you're doing that.
I am.
I really believe that when you go back and come forth, you will get to the people get to know their heroes.
Absolutely.
Because they don't know their heroes, and it's hard for me, who went away and came back, who have to explain these dancers, and oh my God, it's a hard work.
Yes, Thomas?
I will be brutal because I've done a lot of research from outside, and I suggested this panel, but also I've been mapping out where are Trinidadians. Internationally, Trinidadians are really strong. There's a lot of companies who are run by Trinis or people with Trini heritage all over the world. New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, you name it, and so on. What is fascinating to me is a lot of them return, and a lot of them do try to give workshops, but are not promoted locally. And so I'm in Norway, and I am aware of that, and I am able to
Well, I
see
wanted
that.
you to say it. I wanted you, all the panelists, to say it.
I was greeted with a lot of love, so I'm not gonna. So this is no bitterness from me. When I was there now, the classes were full, but I am seeing a problem with that. Trinidad is not really embracing the resource which the people who have gone outside represents. I have to put that in the space and say that has to change for the next generation. There has to be water that is stagnant becomes poisonous.
Yeah. Yes, could I just interject there a little bit?
It's your panel.
Yes. So you talk about Makeda, you talk about dancers, they're not even
Patrick gave me some kind of hip hop here.
Patrick, you're
full primer.
Patrick,
is everybody back? Yes.
It's better.
You're kind of dark though.
I'm kind of dark.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not seeing your face.
You know what happened?
What happened?
The time is changing here, and I didn't put on my light. Could you give me a second?
Well, you better not let the time run out and don't come back to Trinidad and tea.
So while we wait on Patrick, I'll just jump in. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Is a little better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, Bakary and I had a little talk the other day, and he was talking about him being back home, and people don't even like embrace that he was there to ask for stuff, so that's one, right? When I was a young dancer, I didn't know about pearl primers. I didn't even know Beryl McBurney, did work in the US, with her name La Belle Rosette. His research get me there. And a lot of Trinidadians don't know that, right? So it's when I left my country and I traveled out and then studied dance history outside, I found that out. And then I know about Pearl and the work she have done. I mean, she never danced in Trinidad, but she was a Trinidadian, married to another Trinidadian, right? And worked with Catherine Dunham. And it's through Catherine Dunham I found out about Pearl, right? Because I was studying dance from a different idiom and female Black dancers, and I was studying Catherine Dunham. But that I had to leave Trinidad to do that. Yeah. And when we go back there, right, it's the powers that be there supposed to enhance to invite us in so that we can be part of the fabric, to share, because we will do that. The dance history in Trinidad now, I don't know, because there's the university program, I don't know how it's structured, right? I thought would have been given dancers more of that. My dance history was Jean Coggins Simmons going to Tobago, going Toco, going Matlot, going to the Orisha tent and studying our cultural dance forms. And those who went to Jamaica and they come back, they share those information. So it's very hard to say, like the young people there don't know, but with today's technology, it's supposed to be a little bit easier, I think. In our times was a little bit harder, right? Because we were insulated. You know, unless we travel, we will not know. And which young dancer at that time will travel? You know, I had the opportunity with few of dancers to travel to the US with Esther and to different parts of the Caribbean island, studying in Haiti, in Dominica, being in New York, being in different parts of the US. Not much dancers have that opportunity unless the government send them on a trip with something that they win. So the question is, what platform is being created for them to find these things out? That's my question about the physical dancer in Trinidad, if they're ready.
SOCA TV will bring that to you. SOCA TV will do it for you. And while we are that question, SOCA TV will definitely make you all look good now, because we are going towards the videos to show some of your work to the viewing audience. Here we go.
What do we have up first? And while the video is showing, you all feel free to speak on your piece and give us a little insight into what is taking place.
But we are muted while the video plays, so we can't speak at the same time.
You can
after the video.
Okay, after the video, yes.
Okay then. Oh,
all right.
And that piece was done by Mr. Bakary. So Bakary, you want to explain a little to the audience? A beautiful, I must say, the aesthetic in that piece was beautiful.
The work is called Primal Pet, and it's actually one of my early works that I created when I was just developing my own language. Part of my discovery very early that the colonial language would not speak for me as an artist. It did not speak for me in terms of the work that I wanted to say and the work that I wanted to do. So I decided that I will draw on my Caribbean heritage, and I did quite a lot of research in the Senegambia region in West Africa, learning West African dance, and be able to take that vocabulary, that language, and that aesthetic to create some work. So that work was very, very early in the process of developing a language. I mean, it has evolved tremendously since then, but it was a very early work from that.
You were at École des Sables, right?
Repeat that, Thomas. I didn't hear.
You were by Germain.
No, I didn't. I didn't go to SAP. I actually went to. So I did Senegal, Gambia, Casamance, Côte d'Ivoire, and Mali.
Doing the work. You're muted, Gregor.
Nice.
You were muted. We saw your mouth, but not your words.
Jamie.
No, not my word. Not nice at all. Not nice. I mean, but the dance was a very. I like the body aesthetics. I really like the Caribbean-ness of it and the African-ness of the dance. So let's go on to Jamie's work and see what Jamie have to offer. Jamie,
Yeah.
oh, those are some intricate feet work. Very
Yes.
intricate, and it's more of, well, a little talking from a choreographic side. I've seen a lot of the European influence alongside with the African. That nice collaboration there. So you want to explain it for me?
Yes, so for me, that is where my creative language lies, right? I've taken my body through rigorous training to learn ballet and modern. And I've always been in love with this, even before I even came to the States. That's what brought me to the States. And I'm also in love with my heritage, the way we move. And I believe that those of us who have the opportunity to tell stories with our bodies, and if we're able to tell multiple stories, then I become an ambassador to open doors to different spaces, right? And so I frequent ballet faculties because of my understanding of contemporary dance, and that is how I end up teaching Afro-Caribbean folk in ballet schools. And so I felt it was it's part of my purpose to be able to mold those languages together, because they are a huge, I think there's a demand for it. I also feel like that helps when I think Makeda mentioned how students were so infatuated with ballet, with the European forms. And I'm like, I was one of those people, but I was also not willing to let go of where I came from. And so because then I can create this new hybrid, I can show you, yes, you can learn that to add that to where you come from. And then you're able to express yourself in a hybridized way. I think moving forward, we've seen a lot more mixtures: jazz, contemporary jazz, Latin jazz, Afro jazz. And I think as a Caribbean dancer, we have a distinct way of moving already. And so I find excitement in being able to experiment with that. And that what we just saw was a workshop that I had during the semester that I was at Edna Manley. I invited the dancers from different dance organizations to be able to just experience my movement language, where it's a mixture of ballet, modern, jazz, and our Caribbean movement.
Well, you did really succeed.
Were you dancing in one of those pieces?
I was the person in the red. I had long hair at that time. I was demonstrating in the front, in the red, in the first part of the video.
Right, dancing choreographer. I love to see that that choreographers can actually perform what they want their dancers to do. That is really exciting to see. A lot of people, sometimes I see people sit and talk and they say, do this, do that. And if you ask them to do it, they're unable to. So it was really nice to see you actually demonstrating.
I believe that there's two kinds of choreographers. I've known choreographers who did not reach a particular level in their dancing experience. However, what they're able to conceptualize, their only task is to be able to communicate that. It is a misconception that a choreographer has to get up and show you the step. That's what you're there for. Dance. And as a choreographer, my job is to master my communication from my concept to your body. And because you're open and because you're supposed to be investigative, it's a lazy dancer that will stand up and say, show me. That's when I say, thank you so much, you're done for the day. Right? And so we have to be able, it's a misconception. And I do the same thing when I'm teaching. if I start the semester, I will demonstrate full out. I'm still able to do that, thank God. But I won't be able to do that for a long time. I might not want to do that. When I was teaching at Edna, at mid-semester, I sat down. Because you have enough vocabulary, you have enough concept, and you have enough process. So I can sit down and say, okay, add a turn here, do this, release this. I want that to be a distal initiation. Make that round, jump it, turn it. And that is part of the education process that we have, right? Is to be able, it's almost like in elementary school, I don't know if they still do it now, but back when I was in elementary school, we used to have dictation where the teacher reads and you have to write and punctuate. Yes. And spell, right? And so for me, when I sit down, that is dictation time. And that's also part of your learning. So the choreographer does not, we don't have to get up there and say, that's a show. When I say, sir, can you show me? Did you buy a ticket for the show or did you come to learn? Right? If I'm going to demonstrate, you got to buy a ticket and pay for the class.
That's right.
Well, I give you kudos on that because teaching folk dance, I could only show it 3 times, and sometimes in some folk dance classes, I show it 100 times. And when I get home, I'm so tired, I just lie down and knock out.
And they barely get it.
Yes, yeah. So I hope people realize that more funding have to go with folk dance teachers because we don't have a language where we could just sit down and say, do this, do that. We have to get up and show all the time.
But you know, sometimes I think it's also, I know Bakary wants to speak. I think sometimes we set ourselves up for that, right? And I think it's like what Makeda is saying and what everyone has been saying. If we begin to teach our classes with history on top, they will when they pull up that skirt, they were pulling up the skirt with an understanding versus with do as I say. But if we keep teaching in a do as I say manner, we're going to always have to make it a physical experience and a cultural and a spiritual one. And so a lot of times when I'm teaching, I give information, like when I teach Belizean dance or folklore dance too, I talk about this step is when I meet the person in the market and you see your friend across the street. And usually you shout for that person from across the street. You don't wait until you get up to each other. And then you put your hand on your hip and you lean back and you say, good morning, how are you? And so I take them through that entire process before we even do the physical step. So when they're looking at each other, I'm like, even though it's going to be an American, you're going to say, hello, how are you? It's fine. Let's transpose that. But still, the human experience is layered before the physical experience. It is a European or Western form where the movement comes before the human experience. Ballet first position turned out, and you must be turned out 150 degrees because that is the standard. And I respect that. However, in our language, the human experience comes before the physical movement.
Jamie,
you should try teaching. You should try teaching a people dance, trying to teach them a dance on the street, because these children. Now I am not pulling down the people, but I just find being a choreographer today. Long ago, it was easier to do to tell us, and we had the human experience. But nowadays, you have to teach them the human experience and show them and demonstrate it. So it's like by the time you're ready to teach dance, better do something else.
No,
because you
Makeda.
No, because I think that we are, as Candace said before, we were sort of mushing together 2 different things. Now, when we talk about folk dance as it's practiced in amongst the folk, is not the same thing as when it's going to be taken to the stage or when you're going to research it and abstract it and da-da-da-da-da-da. So you have to be really specific. And I really hate how we mush things together and we lose all sense of the thing, right? So we're not talking about our traditional dances and practices as it's practiced in community. We're talking about people who are professionals. This is what they do for a living. Someone will pay them for this. Someone will buy tickets to see them do it. And it's totally different. She's getting hungry. So I just want to again to just remind us of that difference that I thought that we were talking about it in terms of professionalism and in the international market, not as how we practice in our communities for our spiritual salvation. We're talking marketing. We're talking marketing. We're talking about selling funders and ticket buyers and passer buyers. It's a whole other thing. We're talking not about people who are gathered at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., going until the morning. We're talking about people who are rehearsing during the day for 8 hours a day, and they're paid for 8 hours a day of rehearsal, and then they come back and they have to do it again, and they have performances, and those are different realities.
Bakary?
Oh geez, so much has happened since the train of thought back. So there are a lot of things. I think in terms of choreographing and whether you sit down or demonstrate, there's context. And I think for me, one of the realities is having an injured back for almost a year has put a different context on what it is to be able to choreograph and teach. And I think, yes, it's very possible to be able to be a teacher who can sit down and choreograph. I've had to do it. Actually, presently, I'm creating a work on Philadelphia, which is a major company, and I can't move. I mean, I've had an assistant who is incredible. She knows my movement very well, and she was able to go and do some of the movement. But there's still things about the way I've moved and the development of my technique that she doesn't quite understand. So I keep praying every day that I'm able to move by the time we find COVID's over and I see them again the next time I see them. But the next piece that I want to put in there is, and going back to Gregor's comment about folk, is about, again, I cannot stress enough about that investigation and that interrogation of our folk material. And if that is done in a very sophisticated way, you can sit down and teach folk.
Of course.
The technique that I've developed is not about looking at steps, not about looking about tradition. It's about learning, about understanding body aesthetics. And in any dance, there are body aesthetics. And if you train your dancers to understand the specific and the aesthetics of any specific dance, you can sit down because they know what you want aesthetically. Right? You only have 2 feet.
So, Edison, would you like to tell the viewing audience and even some of the hosts, what is the name of your technique so that we'll get?
The technique is called a theory, and it draws on the aesthetics of Caribbean folk dance and West African dance. And what I did is that I spent 3.5 years, 6 months. Then it was 4 months and then 2 months in West Africa. And then I had the wealth of my Caribbean experience that I could draw from, but just not looking at steps per se. And I'll sort of give you a background. I remember teaching a folk dance class in Toronto, and it was all European women in class. And I gave a step. It was a very simple movement where they were just pretending you were shaking a towel out. I mean, that's what we call, when you wash clothes and you shake, that was the step. And your feet was just doing a very light shuffle. Very, very basic. And I said to them, pretend you're washing. And blank. Nothing.
Because they don't wash.
They don't wash. So I was driving home, pissed as hell, going, big old women. I mean, they couldn't understand. And then I started to investigate and interrogate myself and go, that information wasn't helpful because they all wash in machines.
Right.
And that was the genesis of me going, no amount of history, no amount of tradition is going to get them to understand that. I have to look at physical aesthetics. Yeah. And that was the genesis of me. So the technique that I've developed is that you guys can use it to train dancers, because when you train them, it's not about teaching a piqué or teaching a ballet. It's about teaching body aesthetics. Why do I carry my body in a particular way for each different dance? How does a ballet different from a piqué, from a shango, from the dances in Soraka? What are the different aesthetics in those dances? And what do I need to do to become better at those things? It's not about learning steps.
I think we also...
Steps.
Excellent. And
I think we also have to consider somebody said it earlier, but also sometimes in the school system, if we're not doing a master class, you have an hour and a half. There might not be enough time. And especially if there's a recital at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, you may not have enough time. So we also have to investigate and investigate so that we can innovate the process of how how do you pass that information on? Even in our folk classes, are we using a European structure, a lesson structure to pass on that information? And as Makeda said earlier, that's also two different things. And so, you know, we just have to be very intentional and to pinpoint in what context are we talking about? In what are the expectations across the different contexts, right? Because I do think me being able to teach a ballet class, for me, this is how I processed how my game plan about how I'm going to be successful. I knew that if I mastered ballet, I know there's no kind of blood transfusion that would take my Caribbeanness away. Good luck trying, right? So I was secure in that. If I learned to teach ballet very well, and I learned to master modern, and I choreograph, and I can coach well, I can teach whatever I want. They will tell me teach whatever, teach a Jamie class. I hear it a lot. Just teach a Jamie class, and I could teach whatever I want, you know. And so in that context, I then decide how I have to speak your language so well that you ask me, what else do I do, right? In that context. So, however, when I go to the Caribbean, if I'm teaching in Haiti or Belize or Jamaica, I flip the script. What context am I in? Right? So that my class in New York will look very different from my class in Jamaica, might also look different from my class in Haiti, and will definitely look different from my class in Belize. And I think sometimes as educators, we don't always have to stand on the box and say, well, that is not how you do an yarn value. That's not how you do an undulation. Well, like Bakary said, they may have never done that before, and they look like they're about to faint, right? And so then I have to figure out how then, as an educator, as a communicator, as an information giver, as a conduit for new information, for experience, how do I turn this experience presently into something that will promote my culture in this space versus speaking it in an umbrella, in a generalized way? I think we have to also challenge ourselves as gatekeepers, not only to keep the truth. I feel like being able to translate it is also a part of speaking the truth so that they can experience that aesthetic that Bakary was talking about. Because it's not so much about the step. For us, we know what the step means. And as someone with their first class being a ballet class, is this that those worlds are so far apart, but they gain a greater understanding because we bring the experience in the room, and also release it from our pride, right? We have to release it from our pride a little bit to where, like, listen to me, I know you might only get the neck part in this yarn value. I'll take it. Look at this video. Look at Jean-Guy's company. Look at this voodoo festival. Look at this. I gave more information for them to see, also beyond myself, and also beyond themselves, that it's a little bit more than that. So we have to, we can't blank, we're no longer at the space where we can blanket. We're going to have to begin to differentiate and diversify so that we do get to the same goal, but we're going to have to learn to speak multiple languages according to the context that we're in.
But Makeda, before we go to the next video, you spoke about in the community in comparison to the international scene. You want to choreograph a Trinidad market scene. How would you express that to the international professional dancers so that they could understand and get the gist of that, the content you want and in what context you want? Makeda?
You have to unmute.
What was the question exactly? How would I construct a Trinidad marketplace that would what?
You know, on an international scene for professional dancers to understand. What would you do that would be different? Oh, there's a market right here.
Okay, you're all right.
What would you do that will be different from if you teach in a community group in Trinidad and Tobago? How would you pass on the information?
Or I'm working with dancers here.
Yes, professional.
Okay, go open it. He'll help you. What would I do different? I mean, I think that what I would do is most express through the work that I've done through the Institute for the last 10 years. This year is our 10th anniversary. And we have, the Institute has brought in so many artists and scholars from throughout the African diaspora as a way to engage local artists in this international marketplace, right? So for me, that's my work. You know, that has been my guide for the last 10 years in having conversations that I wasn't seeing being had. Dance was this sort of, is this thing that happens behind another art form or to complement another art form versus a thing in and of itself. And so my work through the Institute has been to center Caribbean dance in international discourse. I think that is all anyone can do. You know, I literally the first year of the Institute, I called, you know, people that were my friends. I was like, will you come to Trinidad and give a class in XYZ? And they were like, yeah, you know. But again, as I don't remember who mentioned it, it's for when the people arrive here after, you know, there's no support for this, there's very little support for this. So this is happening by the effort and the label of individual people. There's no amazing grant that everybody's getting from the Ministry of Culture to make any of the last 10 years of the Institute happen, right? So after all that effort, you know, there's a few things that I've experienced. There is a lack of self-esteem, trying to always remind our local dancers that they deserve to be in this space, that they have something to contribute to this space. There is tribalism. People only work with this one. They only dance with this one. Dancers who've been growing up here, lived here all their whole lives, don't know one another or have never danced in the same space together. What is that? You know? When Rennie Harris is here, he spends,
can I have some water, please?
I think Trinidad twice. He spends so much of his time, and he's a hip hop choreographer and, you know, artistic director of his own company. And he spends so much time telling Trini breakers to develop their own style of breaking and hip hop that was specific to here. And so many of the dancers were like, yeah, but can you just teach us what they do in Philly? Can you show us what they do in Brooklyn? And he's like, no, because, you know, and I think Rennie said something like, no, that's mad corny, you know, if you do it. But what is amazing, if you show me something that can only come out of this space, that's what we want to see. So again, that again ties into my own individual work and what I've done to sort of create the space for these things to happen, and how it then could inform our engagement in an international marketplace, because that's what they're looking for, right? They're not, you can't come, I mean, if you're a local dancer trying to, and again, I'm trying to scale down the space a bit more to remind us that we're of the world. We are doing global work here, but fine, right? That if we have to, you can't go to New York and out best a New York trained dancer that has been doing that. You have to bring your deal to the table. They're looking, they want that. But there's this, and again, perhaps this is connected to the effects of colonization, to make you feel that you are inadequate, to make you feel that you don't deserve, that you don't have anything to contribute to the conversation. So that's a lot of what I have been working on towards.
Okay.
Again.
we want to move on to another video. We see our time is starting to run out, so we want to move on to 2 hours is passed already. I want to move on to a video by Thomas Talawa, Presto. Then you talk a little bit about it afterwards.
The lies I spun are seeping through. Waves crashing in, waves crashing in. So stay close, embrace your despite ill times, I won't despair. My soul will find us tonight. Waves crashing in, waves crashing in. So stay close. Simmer down, simmer down, simmer down,
Wow, that looked like a whole Siraka in all those dances. I have seen all the all the nation dances. But Mr. Talawa, would you explain to the audience, and to us, probably, what were your intentions behind the choreography?
Just note that the video had to cut a little bit because the entire thing was not fitting in the slot. So we apologize for that.
I noticed. No, I'm joking. The entire piece is 18 minutes. It's called That Voodoo That We Do. And what I was really investigating was that what makes us unique and what is our practices, our ancestral practices, which is then a continuation. So as opposed to ballet and modern dance breaking with ballet and postmodern dance breaking with modern dance and contemporary dance breaking with postmodern dance, that is actually not our story. So when we say contemporary pertaining to our bodies and our personhood, it is a different contemporary.
Yes.
And that is the first thing we need to claim. So that's one thing that I'm doing. In that entire piece, there's not a single ballet reference anywhere. So that was also a point, and Richard knows I've been fighting that fight since the get-go. I will also say that entire piece is choreographed from a chair. Unapologetically choreographed from a chair, because if you codify correctly and you teach and you communicate, like Jamie said, you're able to communicate something as complex as a video work like that from a chair. It is absolutely possible for our genres and our styles as well, but we have to do the foundation work to get to that point. Also acknowledging that a lot of the dancers that I have are born in Scandinavia, which is a really predominantly white country. They are not born growing up with folk dances around them. They're not grown with any of those references. So polyrhythms has to be trained from scratch. Polycentric movement, access to the hips, access to the spine has to be trained from scratch.
Not an assumption. It's not an assumption.
So we have to, and I think that's actually one thing that I will say a little bit that I've realized. In the first, it used to really annoy me that you always had to start from scratch. And then I started to appreciate it because it has made me a better communicator and it has made me a better teacher, that you cannot assume. And also have a really Pan-African company. I do not have two dancers with the same national background. I don't have two Jamaicans, two Trinis, and so on. So I will have a Yoruba, an Igbo, a Cuban, and a Trinidadian all engaging in, let's say, Orisha movements. They all have the reference. Their positionality in relationship to the vocabulary is vastly different. And some of them are 400 years apart. So then you really have to communicate aesthetics. And then you also have to negotiate these positionalities, which again happens when you have a heteronormative audience or heterogenic audience, that are very different from each other. Again, you have this negotiation of positionality. And those are the things that can make our work very, very interesting to a vast array of audience if we own it unapologetically. And we don't try to be, like Makeda mentioned, someone else and something else, but you choreograph and you create from your core. And I think there we might be failing the next generation, because what I keep coming upon all the time is to say, yeah, folk, I know how to do the folk because I am from so-and-so and I can express my culture, but I feel I can only express myself through contemporary work. Where's the disconnect where they don't think that their folk is contemporary?
Training.
And it's like saying that, oh, I can only express myself in Queen's English. Really? I don't know a single Trini who's not more expressive in Trini. So it's something about really taking that ownership and doing that unapologetically and knowing what you have. But we spend a lot of time on the people stage apologizing for who we are.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's some silence.
I think. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Makeda.
I was gonna say that as we started on a philosopher, I wanted to offer before the conversation went and we're off. A local philosopher by the name of Burton Sankarali, who is a radical and chock full of knowledge, gives a lecture in which he talks about Caribbean philosophy that has been very, very useful for the thinkers that have come through the Institute, which is that the Caribbean and the idea about the Caribbean as a space is a place where the modern actually precedes the traditional. We are a project of modernity. She has to pee, so I have to go. Forget what I was saying.
That's modern right there. Bakary, you were saying something earlier when Mr. Talawa was talking.
Yeah, it's that notion of hierarchy of training. And and this is where Jamie and I part ways, because I really do not believe that we need to be speaking in colonial language. Our ancestors left us with a wealth of physicality that we haven't even been able to tap into yet. And for me, I honestly do not endorse the idea that unless you're going to go on stage and become a classical ballet dancer, then you don't need to train in that medium. And so for me, when that medium is used to express who I am as a Caribbean man or a man of this global context, I have to me it's schizophrenia. It's huge schizophrenia, that training and working in that vocabulary to try and speak to me as a Caribbean man or a man of a global context. Like, for me, Africa and the Caribbean, we have way too much movement. I mean, we go back to Greg's question about the market. Well, I will throw the question back to Gregor. It's like, what are we saying about that market when we want to create the market there?
I think I would need to jump in there, because I think one of the things that we, as Caribbean people, we have to be aware in our pursuit of global awareness or global participation, or as I call it sometimes, universality. We also need to be okay with diversification. And if a Caribbean dancer wants to learn ballet or modern, they should have the opportunity to do so, because that's what part of being in this time and age is. I do respect our differences. I think I've never been to Makeda's Institute, but I've been hearing about it for years, and the things that I've been hearing about it has been phenomenal. I even considered going 1 year, but I couldn't make it. I think it was the same year as CariFest that I was in Haiti, and I think you were in a different part of Haiti that year, but couldn't make it work. But I do think, for me, for example, what Thomas does is not my voice. And I took it upon myself to learn on my own. I tell him, send me your video, and I learned it. And my back hurt. I think just the thought still hurt. But I do believe that we have to, in our pursuit of establishing in some areas or re-establishing ourselves, we shouldn't strike down other people who have a different route, because I do believe that we're all going in the same direction. The route is different. I do believe that Bakary's technique is necessary. I've never I think I met what's his name, Patrick, is it? I met him one time, I think, at IBD, and I've danced with people who've been a part of Ballet Creole, and I've heard great things. Ballet Creole is important. Tabanka is important. Makeda's Institute important. Richard's time in Book of Mormon, couldn't be more whitewashed. Is important, right? Because what that does, it gives us all the layers, all the language, and the mastery of all the avenues that we need to put our culture at a certain level. In terms of the market, and at the video that I showed, we had a long talk back. It was like an hour and a half, and I had a parent in the audience ask Lantoinette Science, who's the founder and creator of Lantech. She brought up a point. She said she recognized that my movement and her movement are similar in certain ways, and she brought up the point that in Jamaica, a parent would send their kids to the ballet school before they sent them to La Cadco.
Yeah.
And I had to explain this to her. I said, I don't think, there might be some people who definitely think that one form is higher than the next. That's not our responsibility. I do believe that we have to pay attention in terms of the commercialization and goal setting. Those parents don't see not yet. They will see it in the very near future, what the Talawa technique looks like on a professional stage, in a professional production, with checks being paid to their dancers. They have not yet seen that, but they have seen Nutcracker. They have seen Swan Lake. They have seen complexions, lines. They have seen that on a stage where they can aspire to. The visibility of our Caribbeanness, what is limited to the Black dance experience, where we're doing a contemporary dance. There's a ballet section, there's a jazz section, and there's an African section where the dance is only Manjani, right? And so I think that, for example, what I am taking on as part of my life's purpose is speaking all the languages, so that when that Caribbean student decide that I want to learn Western techniques, I can then teach them with the respect to their Caribbean sensibilities, because they should be able to have that choice like I had that choice. And also, like, let's say in the future I become the head of the School of the Arts or wherever, then I will say, okay, Thomas, do you have anyone that can come for the year so that we can teach Talawa technique on the schedule? That is my route, versus him, who needed to be in the space that he is, mastering the things that he mastered and studying the things that he studied, because I don't have the information that Thomas had, but I also have my experience is a passport to inviting him into any place that I go, because I can speak all these languages. So I would appreciate that we need to also be open, not just turn completely 180 and say, no, don't do that, go the other way. I feel like we're, as a culture, as a people, as in our level of intellect, we're way past that, right? So it's not just fighting the system altogether and throw it out the window, because I refuse to be thrown away. I've invest my entire experience as a Caribbean person, as a Caribbean artist. I made sure that I am standing 1 foot or the other in the other place as a straddle. So you can walk across, and as you walk across my connections, you are able to get to any of those spaces with your true identity, and a university where you can collect a check either from the contemporary company if you want, or if you want to go the Afrocentric route, or as Thomas said, the Africana route. You have enough information to make a choice, right? Because it's no longer one or the other. That's back in the slavery days, right? We have one or the other, either fight or die. We no longer have that. We could die. We could become any hybrid that we want. I do believe the people who, like you, Bakary, and like Makeda and Thomas, and what Richard is doing, and Patrick, I do believe that your avenues are important. So right now, it's not a two-way street. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus SOCA TV, a six-way street that we all have to keep holding hands and moving forward together, because all the information that we've experienced. And I also feel like we also have to get to the point where when I saw Thomas's work, and we've had plenty of conversations about his work, and the first thing I said to him, I am so happy that I didn't see any westernized contemporary language. That was the first thing I said to him. You did not point your feet now one time, you didn't do not one pirouette, you didn't do a tilt and contract and punch it. And that's the language that I use because that's my area. But I can still appreciate and become enchanted as I have with the Talawa technique. So I do want us to be able to diversify and to understand that my contemporary language and your respect and the grip that you have on what is at the root is also important, because I learned from you, right? I learned from you also. So it's multiple lanes at the same time.
So very well said, because my teacher Imelda Lynch Griffith, she taught at Tortola for some years, and she went in, they call her in to teach the Western style of ballet and so forth and modern. And Imelda explained to me that, I am folk. So she used that opportunity to slip the folk into the teaching, and the children actually loved the folk. So she was teaching a kind of mixture of both the modern, so the acculturation of the steps. So let's say you, Mr. Talawa, I think, yeah.
No, just to, yeah, and also since we're talking internationally, I also have to mention the way folk is used in Trinidad. I mean, the terminology doesn't necessarily travel well. I just have to point that out, because a lot of people put it on their resume.
You haven't seen my work, Mr. Talawa. You need to see my work.
No.
Or the word you're talking about and not the work.
The terminology.
Okay.
The terminology.
The terminology. Okay. All right.
The movement travels very well. I'm not misconstrued. I'm saying the way the terminology is used doesn't necessarily travel well. In most of Europe, folk dance is considered cultural heritage and locked in time and space. Trinidadians use folk about something that you deem as living. So I'm just mentioning it because we are talking about how do you translate what you do internationally. I have to mention that we really need to be aware that the terminology, the way we use it, does not travel well, and to update oneself of when is it African diaspora dance, when is it nation dance, when is it neo-traditional, when is it indigenous Caribbean, and so on. There's a lot of terminologies to nuance, and which will give you access to stages, funding, education, teaching, etc. But you will place yourself out of that by terminology alone. So I would just wanted to place that. And then I wanted to very quickly also say, because people are being very humble, that anywhere I've traveled, and I mean more than 20 countries, Makeda's name is well known. And the people that she's bringing to Trinidad, like Chris Walker, Rennie Harris is the most famous hip-hop choreographer in the world, having created multiple pieces on Alvin Ailey, for example. So it's like, I don't think people really understand the caliber of people she's bringing into the Trinidadian space and out, and the connections people are missing out on by not really connecting with it. Bakary and Patrick both have techniques that are internationally known. I was able to find out about their techniques here in Norway. Cultural Heritage in Canada mentioned both of their names in the curriculum and everything. Again, Jamie, one of the strongest hybrid technicians out there. If you mention his name in Alvin Ailey, Dallas Black, and so on, he is always the one who got away. All of those companies refer to him as the one who got away. And then Richard is one of the strongest, I really mean, how to explain it? Constructional choreographers, like the constructs of his choreographies are at the level that is not even funny, and his ability to pull things from the movement vocabulary of one form and another form and so on. And he teaches ballet at the National Ballet here in Norway, and then he will go across the street and teach a fabulous jazz class, and then he will wind you up and down the place and so on. So also I just need the people to understand that these are not people that are just, they did a little thing abroad and now we're presenting them to Trinidad. These are people who are defining the international African diaspora dance space, and they are Trinis and or Caribbeans. I need people to really understand that you cannot go to a conference about African diaspora dance without bucking up on one of them or all of them. And I will be quiet.
I just want to go back and contextualize.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that, in terms of, just to clarify for Jamie, I'm not saying that it's wrong to study any other techniques. I am just sort of, in terms of context of even getting back to Makeda, moving forward, thinking about moving forward, growth, thinking about a Trinidadian dancer and a Caribbean dancer on the whole, about how, I mean, and even going back to Makeda's conversation about Renee Harris, about developing a unique identity. While it's great to diversify and to train in all of these techniques, what are we doing to build our own national identity based on the identities that we have here? What
That's
are we
a whole
doing?
new thesis.
Yeah, like, you know, it's like it's great. I mean, you know, I trained in ballet, but very early, I realized if I was going to create something that was uniquely me and develop and push, how are we going to do that? And so that was that comment was to push younger dancers to say, hey, you know what? I do not need to be a ballet trained dancer to be an amazing dancer.
No, right.
Can I just interject a little bit there?
I've heard it for a long time.
Yes, I know, because Makeda was hitting on something that was very, I think, was going to explain who we are, you know, and the amount of knowledge we have, the knowledge base. A Caribbean person, because of our makeup, you know, we are diverse. Yes, we are a diverse culture. You know, we are already a hybrid. I use the word creolization. What does that mean? You know, so we have all of that, and the technique is embedded in our body. No dance movement doesn't have a technique. Like Bakary was saying, we have our technique, but we don't celebrate that. You know, when I was at Best Village to do our classes, we had a structure of getting the body prepared, right? So that the younger dancers who were sheltered from the folklore was able to still execute the movement. We have a technique, you know. We are diverse people of European, Native Indians, Africans, and the rest. That is who we are, and our technique and dance form is involved in that. We are people of the world. The word ballet, I don't use that word ballet as a technique. I use the word classical ballet as the word technique. Ballet for me is telling a story. So when you say ballet, there's many ballets. There's African ballets, there's Indian ballets, you know, all of that. So that word ballet for me is a no-no. It's in my name, my company name, because I'm telling a story through dance. For me, that's what ballet is. And then the creolization is bringing all of the world's culture together in some kind of format to train people. That's why I have already diffused questioning and people asking me to smile and what technique I teach, right? And in this day and time, we have technique that we can fall on. When 30 years ago, we did not have all these techniques. So what was the best thing to do? You bring in different dance styles and different teachers who teach different things to train the body so they can execute the work. Hence me finding out about the Catherine Dunham technique, which is based in some of the Caribbean aesthetics and later on the African aesthetics. right? So now we have techniques from Cuba, we have from Jamaica, now we have 2 in Canada, then Norway, US, Karamu technique. And so we have techniques we can look at to train the bodies from an Afrocentric point of view. So that's my thing. We already have that, you know. So for me, there is no classical, ballet, more than classical lines, which you can take a folk movement and extend it to the extreme, and it becomes that. That's how I see the dance form, you know. And if we want to bring it back, we take away the stretching of the body to be undulated. It's so much of knowledge we have and grow up with that we have to think about what are we trying to communicate and who we communicating for at this time and in this space. And I finish.
With all that said, let's run to another video now because we need to show off everyone's work.
The last video before we start to wrap up.
2 videos.
Nice. Nice work.
Okay,
nice.
so that was Patrick Parson's work.
Patrick, you want to explain your soulful messiahs aesthetic to us?
You know, I think it says what the vocabulary says what it is. You know, the music dictates the storyline, which is dealing with the Messiah, right? You know, but if you look at the ballet itself, you know, it's a celebration of all the dances that we know as popular dances or contemporary, modern. You know, there's hip hop, there's jazz, there is a gamut of dance. It is a full length ballet. So in that little clip, you will see things and you will say that's classical ballet. For me, it's not classical ballet. It's an extension of the folk movement, you know, in West Africa, you know, and that's how I look at that. You know, yes, I was training classical ballet in my later stage, but my first training was folklore, right? And even our folklore, when we create work in Best Village, we distort the lines. So that was always been there. And you see that in that. This ballet itself is looking at a Christmas and what is happening. And the only ballet we know that is done mostly at Christmas time is the Nutcracker. And I wanted to create something else that we can celebrate as diverse people at different ballet, you know, and it is a ballet, it's not classical ballet, you know, and it's not a literal ballet, you know, it's very abstract. So each person will go with something different, you know. There's also the dark part of it, which you don't see here. And I think I'll leave it there. I mean, the vocabulary says it all.
Well, since we're in video conferencing a lot, maybe you'll put it up on Zoom meeting and then we'll all look at it and see the whole full ballet. But there is a Christmas ballet also called Court of Miracles, which I love.
Yes.
I think everybody needs to watch Court of Miracles by Toronto Dance Theatre. And it is the what happened. It's our style, David Earl's Court of Miracles, our style of carnival being done in Paris. Where at one time in the year, everybody would wake up and decide to be somebody. And can I know about that? One morning you wake up and you say your baby doll or your
Juve morning, yes.
Yeah, our Juve morning and their style, and it's beautiful. I like the way of that collaboration. But anyways, guys, looking at all these various styles and genres of dance that exist, whoa, if you put all of you all together in a room, I will hear so much styles that I don't even hear about yet. So which form appeals to you the most and why? Richard, I haven't heard from you a long time. I thought there were easier questions than this in presentation college. Is it presentation on apps?
Please, presentation college.
Okay, there were easier questions.
Oh, that's hard for me because I'm quite, as Thomas rightly said, I'm quite eclectic. I mean, I've done loads of styles. And something, I just want to underscore something that Patrick said that I think was so important, and that was preparedness for the work. That the work and the creation is what drives what you do. Anybody here with a company has their own technique because that's what they needed for what they needed. That was the context. And we have to be very careful that I don't want a company. I don't want a technique after my name. My joy is like Jamie. You could drop me anywhere. And that body aesthetic, because I'm a dancer, but also because I was trained in Trinidad, that body aesthetic, I would pick up. I have trained ballet, modern, and all the modern genres. I've done Indian classical dance. I've done African. I'm a Best Village dancer, folk. But I came to Best Village late. But then too, I mean, I had Eric, Miss Curtin, folk background mix. I mean, it was a hybrid always for me. I love ballet. And I dare anybody to say, because I am Black, I shouldn't be doing it. Frig that. I was the best ballet dancer at my college. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Claim it.
But as someone said, and put me next, I could leave. I mean, like Ailey, ballet class at 9, and I'd be rocking Dunham by 3 because I could.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's saying I'm pretending in any of the dance styles that I've done, because I've made sure, and Bakary brought this up, body aesthetic, most important.
Yes.
Most important. Because if I think, and that's what we need to, and as I said, what Patrick said was really important, preparedness for work. When I was in Thomas's company, I had to learn the way he moved. It didn't matter that I was Trinidadian and that we were doing stuff that I knew. Thomas still moved in a different way than I did. And to fit into his company, I had to learn to do that.
You did it excellently.
Edison, thank you. You know, Bakary and I, we dance in laser part together. You know, I've done Bakary's work. But if I were to do his work now, it's completely different. I watch his work now, and it's completely different to stuff that we did at Les Enfants.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not say, given time, that I can't do Bakary's work. I'm not standing outside here going, oh my God. You know, and that body aesthetic and the ability to be prepared for the work, no matter what that work is. Whether it's for somebody, whether it's on myself. As I said, now I'm on a journey to find out possibly what my personal movement aesthetic is, if I want to go any further with that. But that's my journey, and I can't speak for that yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm still not sure if that's why I want to go. I mean, now, I mean, my life, I've turned my life completely upside down. It's limitless. You know, my future has so many avenues, and I have the right to explore that and see. So, favorite genre? Sorry, I can't answer that question. That's
You
not.
just did. You just did.
That's not where I
All
am.
of them. All of them.
All of them.
You have the aesthetic. Patrick.
Oh no, the thing is that I mean I said a lot just now, but I want to just say, you know, when I was traveling with repertory dance theater and the company performed, you know, people will ask, how come you guys move in all these different ways, right? You know, like because the Trinidad training, you know, give you all of that. With us, I mean, yes, we had dancers who only would train first with classical ballet, but when they come into rap, the way Howard Astor will teach his class, you know, and somebody went and does Best Village, give them the ability to perform different genre of dance on one stage in one night. And people say, wow, how could you move from the drums into the modern, into the semi-neoclassical? And they would ask questions like that. And that's the first time I realized that in Trinidad, we have that training and aesthetics because many dancers from Trinidad used to get scholarship to go to the US with companies, Ailey Company and different, before my time. So that tells us what Trinidadian dancers have, what we have. And we have to find out what it is again, and we have to celebrate that. You know, what is technique for you? What is technique for me? And what is technique for the world? And who are we dancing to? Yeah.
Jamie?
The question is, what would be my favorite technique?
What form appeals to you the most and why? Not what your favorite. Which form
Okay, what
appeals to you?
form? Right. Language is important, and I think sometimes we get lost.
Very important. According to Sonia Dumas, language as a communication.
Yes.
Yes.
So my form of movement right now, I would have to, and this is not just because he's on the call, he knows from our private conversations that I have expressed this, and I will give my reasons why I think Tabanka for me right now is my favorite form. For reasons because he had, I think so sometimes as artists and even as educators, we miss that you must be anointed to be able to shift cultural norms, right? And his anointment is in creating a language that is so pure and honest. And I believe that because it's pure and honest, I can see a clear trajectory with my business mindset. He can mount this specimen of a production and take it anywhere in the world, and people will be in awe as if they're at Cirque du Soleil. A lot of my choices that I made in my personal career, and that I also encourage my students, regardless of whether they're from Haiti, from Jamaica, from Barbados, from wherever, is that at the end of the day, dancers want to be the dancers that would want to learn more from us and want to study dance seriously want a professional career where they can contend on a universal level in auditions, whether it's for Book of Mormon, whether it's for Lion King, whether it's for Ailey, whether it's for Dallas Black, Philadelphia, Dayton Contemporary, whichever of these companies. And so that's why I have ride the wave of the classical lines and the modern lines, because that is your ticket right now. You cannot walk into any audition and be 2 left feet turned in and don't understand how to move in that context. But what I see, what I am speaking into existence, and what I know will happen for Tabanka is that you could bypass all of that and be able to create this. And he's going to have to either super train people and disseminate them out and say, okay, you go here, you go here, because our production has this demand now. But I feel like as Caribbean people, it was hard for us to see the future, right? And I think it's not that we're not proud of our culture. It's not that we think the westernized forms or the European forms are higher than ours. Is that we couldn't see a future for it, right? And also the way our governments and our cultural institutions in our countries support or not the work, it left it in the villages. They didn't take it to the spaces where it can be experimented with, like what Makeda was telling. What Rennie Harris was telling the breakers, experiment with your own language. But as Makeda said, there is no support for that, right? So because there's no support for that locally, what will the dancers do? They will aspire to something that they can see, right? And so I hope my desire, and if I have anything to do with it, that I'm always going to be an advocate and an ambassador and hopefully impresario for the Sabanka technique, because I do believe that there is a future for that, because it is pure, it is honest, and you can't deny it.
Nice. Well, I have the body aesthetic that I want to learn that and a furry together. So I want to learn the both of them together and put it together and see what that will do, because those two techniques are strong. Let's go. Mr. Talawa, I know if you say the Tabanka, I'm gonna faint. Which form of
listen, last time I was in a panel with a teacher that would have said that. No. First, Jamie, I want to say thank you so much. I'm very honored that such a strong technician as yourself are saying the things you're saying. I will get to which styles are my favorites, but I also say that a lot of the people in this panel would be my favorites to work with. I know that Makeda would disrupt me in a way that would be extremely healthy, because she will be able to shift how I think and so on. Bakary has an understanding of balance and weight, which is superb. And I really, really believe Richard already, I know what he can do for me. And Patrick as well has such a strong understanding actually on rhythm connection to movement. Yeah. So I would just want to say that this panel is kind of a dream for me as a team, first of all, I would say. When it comes to dance styles, I would say the Envelops. A lot of times people say the Envelope as if it's one dance, but it's multiple different ones. But the technique required to access the spine in that way, the shifting of weight, the on and off balance, the lines against curve, and so on, it really, really requires a superb level and understanding the forces that play on the body to really execute them well. So for that reason, it's one of my favorite, and a connected genre from Benin called Zinli, 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 and it's also undulating dance, but it's even more grounded, and you will see some fabulous festivals. But the intricacy and the punches and the syncopations that they manage to get that cuts against the flow of a Yanvolo similar style is really superb. And also the understanding on grounding in both techniques. If I'm going to be nerdy enough to say, those are the two genres that I'm really digging into and extracting a lot from.
But I'm glad you did say the Envelope, because most of the panelists, or most of the people on the panelists, Patrick, Richard, and Edison, and Bakary, our first, as soon as they enter a Best Village class in our day, the first thing you learn is the Envelope. That undulation rolling down, that's the first thing they teach you that from day one. Every class you pass by 7 o'clock, every community center, you hear the Envelope, you hear him roll down 2, 3, come up 2, 3, 4, and everybody have to learn that. So
and the traveling with it.
And the traveling with it is a very, thank God you did say that. I hope the young ones on this panel, the viewers are listening, because you are hearing some from the experienced people themselves. Makeda, I would love to hear what you have to say. Makeda, you have been experienced every single style genre I could think of. I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I had a hard time as I'm sitting here trying to suss over like this idea of what form most appeals to me, because you know I am where I am sort of theoretically and as a body. But I have had the most classical of training. I have been a scholarship student at the Graham School when Martha Graham was still alive. Like I was an apprentice at Taylor straight out of university. I before I got to Ron Brown as a company, I was apprenticing at Taylor. Like I mean, the potential, right? The potential for where my career could have gone. So for me, versatility is almost passe. We do that. We've always done that. We know how to navigate many different contexts, languages, situations at the same time. And so I'm more moved by this idea again of futurity. And I'm going to jump with Jamie and call forward Thomas for his work, his consistent work. It as a form of inquiry, it as a form of investigation, it as a form of futurity, it as a form of politics, it as a form of socialization and culture. So, you know, the way that my career manifested meant that I could be doing Caribbean forms, followed by Black American from the South forms, which I had no idea, followed by hip hop, followed by, doing Ron's work that was heavily based on Sabar. And so for me, the form that I most value in that moment is the form that I need for that moment, right? So I love dancing. When we talk about dance and how dance is out, my son is a gamer. The entire 2.5 hours that we've been on, he's been gaming. That's why he's been quiet. We haven't heard from him. That was my negotiation for him to get him to be quiet. He can game as long as he wants while this is going on. And I connect with him because of the amount of dancing that's a part of Fortnite. And of course, that allows me to talk about politics and allows me to talk about other things. And then I talk to him about how complicated Fortnite is because no one is paid for those dances, and that's real work. But that aside, so when I'm with him and we're in the house, COVID, my dancing partners are my children. They've been quarantined with me this whole time. The dances are whatever they're into. And that at that moment is the most important dance in the world. And then if I shift to another space, that becomes the most important dance in the world. So that's why I am on that.
Okay,
Well, Thomas, to get 2 out of, let's see. Mr. Bakary, if you say Thomas, I'll faint.
But wait, can I also just say, for me was also a practice of us bigging up one another, right? Mm-hmm. To call each other brilliant, to name each other as founders, to remember each other when we're citing research, that we don't go to Plato and Aristotle, we cite Burton and Thomas and Jamie and Richard and Bakary.
That's why this show is on. That's why SOCA TV called you all.
Yes.
Because we want people to start citing from our local and Caribbean men.
Each other.
And women.
Because the more we cite each other, the more we are going to be cited. And we then begin to rewrite. We begin to then write our own thing, right? So this is all part of the process of decolonization, which, yeah.
Dr. Hollis Liverpool always believe in that. Dr. Hollis Liverpool said, anytime you have to cite any social issue, cite from the Calypsonians.
That's
because
right.
they know a thing. So that's one of the things you always say. Okay, Mr. Bakary, let's say you.
This stage in my life, for me, the technique is about the physical language, physical storytelling. So I don't gravitate to a particular style. It's about physically storytelling, and whatever language you use to tell that story, I'm good with it. Because when I come into the theater, I'm there for the narrative. I'm there for the story. I don't care about the technique. I don't care about the movement. I'm there for whatever the narrative. Sometimes it's linear, sometimes it's abstract, sometimes it's weird, so Richard doesn't get it. But whatever it is.
Richard!
But for me, it's about the physical narrative. I always tell people I'm not a dancer, I'm a physical storyteller. Because when I step on stage, it's about me conveying the story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how much pirouettes I can hit. I don't care how much twirling I can twirl. If the story isn't coming from deep within me, then it doesn't matter. So it's not about a technique or style. It's about physical storytelling for me.
Yeah.
Well, guys, all of you all could be doctors. You know, you all have coined words tonight on this show that I'll be using over and over again in my thesis. Very, 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 very eloquent panel.
Guys, unfortunately, our time is up. But I really, really want to thank all of you for appearing and sharing your experiences and your knowledge with all of us. I made some notes here of little things that I wanted our viewing membership to remember. The few points that hit home for me that I would also want to remind my students of, that when you are creating, to think a little deeper about your pieces, to do a little more analysis and don't just throw movements together. We need to start also appreciating our experiences now, because we're not sure how we're going to use what we are learning now, further on in our careers. And Gregor made the point about placing yourself in modernity with respect to marketing and planning, because I know, of course, we have to move with the times and we have to be able to market our product and, as Thomas would say, fill our halls with more than 98% capacity. You all also made the point about paying attention to the technique, and I want to thank all of you all for the techniques that you all would have created, for those who would have. And I would make the point that SOCA would want to somehow bring those techniques to light, probably show them somewhere, make sure it is taught somewhere in the Caribbean, but that is a whole next story and a lot of work. I'd also want to thank Mr. Talawa for pointing us in the direction of these persons, this panelists, and for bringing to light the importance of their work, all right, and how important they are and the work that they have done. Thank you very much, Mr. Presto.
Thank you.
And I also want to mention that SOCA TV, we would also try to play our part in enlightening our local dancers as to right? And yes, we want to use this platform. We want to continue using this platform, as Makeda said, to be able to big up each other. Yes? And I want to thank everyone again.
Yeah.
And I did not know any of you. I did not know all of you, sorry. And it was a pleasure for me to meet you and get to know you. I know our viewing audience will also have the same feeling. And I had a lot more questions, but I know the time is always an issue. So hopefully in the future, we will be able to meet again.
And I'm glad you did. One thing I really must say that you all gave to our viewing audience is that don't matter what style of dance, it's the body aesthetic that counts. Yes. And I appreciate everything. I appreciate that sentiment from all of you all. You said the same thing. I am not going to have my dancers going around say I'm a ballet dancer, I am a folk dancer, I am a modern dancer. I want my dancers going around say I am a professional dancer. We have learned marketing styles, we have learned all these things, and thank you all very much for bringing that to the forefront.
Thank you, guys. We want to let our viewing audience know that we have a workshop coming up on Thursday. This is one of our local dancers, Mr. Simeon Peters, and he is going to conduct Caribbean folk Orisha workshop and burnout. Also with him, he would have Jamal Walker and Shaquille Kadeem Mitchell also taking part, and of course our famous drum corps, from the Northwest Lamantil Company Cultural Movement, and this will be held at the SWTU Hall on Rising Road, Port of Spain. And you all can see from the advertisement there that you can call the number for more information, 339-5202. So we really want our local dancers to come out and support this venture.
It's $50 for adults and $30 for kids 12 and under. So you really need to come out, people, because I don't think you'll get a next workshop like this in a hurry.
This is a precursor to our Emancipation Day celebration, and we want to encourage all of you to come out. Thank you again to our panelists. We really appreciate you and hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us on SOCA TV. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye. Good night. Good night.
Right.